Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to week 5 here in CE 185, Menu Design and Management. Chef Matthew and I welcome you to another fine live session. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us. Week 5 out of 6. Congratulations, everybody. You guys are rocking the house. Chef Matthew and I were talking earlier today, and we are impressed with the grades in this class. So all of you have been doing a fantastic job. Us as educators, chefs, when we see people grasping concepts and growing and learning, that's where our real payday is, and we really appreciate that. So you guys are doing fantastic. And so Chef Matthew and I just want to say thank you very much for all of your effort. Thank you very much for taking the time to attend the live sessions, and thank you for all the great assignments. It makes our day very joyful, so we really appreciate it. Here, we kind of get short timers disease in week 5 and week 6, if you all know what that is. We want to make sure that we keep the passion and the flame alive for the next couple of weeks. You've all come so far. Don't let your guard down now. The next 2 weeks are pretty good weeks here in CE 185. So remember why you're here and keep it going. The holidays get busy. We get lots of invites to parties, especially when you're a chef. Everybody wants you at their parties so you can cook. Trust me. You guys are going to get phone calls left and right. Your list of Christmas Day invitations is going to be from the ceiling to the floor because they know you have ability, right? So get ready for that. But certainly keep it going. Week 4, everyone, how'd it go? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways. Yeah? Mary Lou's jumping at the keyboard. What do you have to say, Mary Lou? How'd you like it?
I really enjoyed it. It took me a while to pinpoint the menu I wanted to look at. And I really went with the cafe one. Considering I worked at a small cafe, I could really relate a little more to that. And I love the feedback. And I guess it's more of the areas that I'm in. I know Chef Mejia's feedback was what I had pointed out as being, in my opinion, the most expensive was because it kind of happened to us in a restaurant versus when he pointed out the other one. I was like, you're so right. It like jogged my memory, but I was like, oh no, it's this one. But it was just my personal experience. And I really liked it due to that same thing that we just look at menus and we don't consider how much money is actually spent on these meals being prepared.
Yeah.
So I had a good time.
Yeah, well, cool. Great job, Chef Matthew, on the feedback, and then great job on your assignment, Mary Lou. So that's fantastic, and that's great to hear as well. Yeah, the menu pricing is it's not, there's no black and white formula that we can come forth and tell you guys this is the way it is. This is the way you tighten the bolt, and that's where you put the screwdriver. It does not work that way in the restaurant industry. It takes some finesse and some understanding of not only your customers, but your cost to produce the items and your volume of sales and your particular item sales. So don't rush into the game thinking, oh, this is the way you do it and this is the way it's going to be, because you know what? You have to be flexible and open-minded in order to succeed. Franklin, what do you think about the about week 4?
It was interesting. It was good. I didn't have no issues really.
Yeah, what'd you pick up from it?
I went with the duck goose. I went with that. I mean, I looked into it and I kind of searched other people that had that on their menu, and it's a little hard to find duck breast over here. You know, so it was more difficult. It's more expensive. When it's harder to find, it's more expensive.
That's pretty much everywhere. You just don't see a lot of duck breasts widely available.
So I just took different menus, and you know, I mean, if something costs more to buy, it must cost more to, you know, if you go to a restaurant, something costs $50-$60. I'm assuming, you know, it's gonna cost more to make. So the higher it sells, the higher I guess it makes. I mean, so I went with the duck goose. And I did some research, and I probably shouldn't have used one of Trump's hotel's menu because it was going for like $200 there.
Did you do the Trump Hotel in Washington?
No, I did the one in Chicago.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I did the one in Chicago.
David Burke has his BLT restaurant in Donald Trump's place in Washington, D.C., and there's some serious prices on that menu.
And then, the other ones, because I own a food truck. I own a Dominican cuisine,
Cool.
And I know that some of the other things are, cheaper, so I use that as a reference also. But, I went with the Duck Duck Goose. I did some research, and I think that was one of the ones that was, I hit it more head on.
Do you go through a lot of black beans?
Actually, we do deep fried things. I have in my country. There's a burger called the chimichurri burger, which is basically a hamburger with a special sauce that we make that has 5 ingredients. It has Worcestershire sauce. It has ketchup, mayonnaise, yogurt, and either sour oranges or a lemon, and then that's called the chimichurri sauce. And we put it on the burger, and we put it on the burger. We put it on a Portuguese roll, and then we dress it up with tomatoes, onions, and cabbage.
Wow, that sounds delicious.
And we put it together, and I sell it for $5 in my truck. So, but I get some of my spices, I get it shipped directly from the Dominican Republic. So that makes it, I guess, authentic cuisine.
That's cool, man. I appreciate you sharing that. That's I love I know the Dominican Republic, and I know it from an arm's length, and I love it when people share particular things about their culture and their food, because there's a million different hamburgers, but when you put it into your own perspective, that's when it becomes yours. And I think that's so cool, man. And that's what this industry is all about, is really shining in a unique light. So thank you very much for sharing. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, guys. Thank you.
Melanie, you have anything to share about week 4? Okay. She's looking for the mute button. There you go.
That my son wasn't squealing. He stuffed his Raisinets in his socks. I had a good time with it. I think it was fairly easy. I don't know. Some of the stuff I've never tried or ever even heard of, so I had to kind of look into most everything. And I'm with Cafe Luke, I want to say is what it's called. I just went with what seemed to me to be the most expensive off the menu, and then I just kind of looked into that item itself.
Right. Awesome. Well, good
Chef,
job.
I had my mind kind of made up what I thought were the most expensive items, or the most pricey because of cost and labor. And then I got talked out of it a couple times because people made some compelling remarks about it. And really, it is regional in some cases. We don't have the actual cost that these restaurants are paying for these. Even if we look up online and find shrimp for $14.99 a pound, that's not an accurate price. We don't know. We don't know what they're paying. They may be buying 400 pounds at a time. They may be buying half a truckload for 12 restaurants. We don't know. So there's too much play in the cost to really be 100% accurate. So I had to be flexible. I hope I was. I hope I was flexible enough. And I hope I explained why I thought what I thought well enough. So, but I think it was a neat assignment. So very, very interesting, and definitely took some knowledge of preparation to make your choice as well. So
I heard a couple of comments both from Melanie and Franklin that kind of stuck in my mind while they were talking. One is Melanie said she chose, in her opinion, what she recognized, and I think that's the beauty of the restaurant industry. It's basically your perception of the reality is your restaurant, right? And it has to be in your opinion, and that's what defines us as chefs, right? You can go to the Olive Garden, and there's nothing about the chef's opinion there, or there's nothing about what the chef likes. It's a generic statement, and when you can share your own opinion, I think that is a very valuable and artistic thing that we allow ourselves to do. Franklin mentioned his assumption about the most expensive item on the menu is generally the most costly to make. And there's a lot of value to what was said there. But in the restaurant industry too, there's oftentimes we will raise our prices on the highest volume items in order to capture more revenue. So for example, if I'm selling, a couple hundred ribeye steaks at $50 a pop a week, I can do a little research, and if I can get 55 out of it, I'm going to bump that price to 55 regardless of my cost. And then secondly, we talked last week, sometimes you can put a steak on a menu at $50 a pop and sell it at 50% food cost, which as a percentage is a very expensive item to prepare, but you're putting 25 bucks in the bank versus selling a hamburger at $10 for 32%, and you're only putting $6.80 in the bank. So there's a lot of funky things that go in to that. And I'm always a little bit hesitant when I go into a restaurant and I see, a $40 average menu price, and then there's one $70 item. That tells me that item probably doesn't move too quickly, right? So I get a little concerned about the quality of that product. So those are just some comments that I heard, but I really appreciated Mary Lou, Franklin, Melanie, everybody's sharing your comments. What about you, Shannon? What do you think about week 4?
I have no idea what I was doing.
Awesome.
No, I learned a little bit more than like what I deal with every day. I've learned a little bit more on how to dwell on more like what goes on behind the scenes of making a menu. Because I kind of wanted to get into research and development after this for the Outback Steakhouse, so that kind of like opened my eyes to like going into seeing like pretty much breaking down what you guys are getting into the food cost and to the labor of everything. I mean, I kind of know most of it, but it kind of helped me open my eyes a little bit more and do a little bit more research behind each and individual item. So especially with week 3 and then week 4, kind of tied in together. So it kind of helped me out.
Yeah, I think you just mentioned something really critical. When I got into this industry and I graduated and I became a chef and all these other great things, I knew one way to do it. And I became very closed-minded that was the only way to do something.
Exactly.
And over the years, I've learned that there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, so to speak. And you maintain that open-mindedness, especially when it comes to working with financial matters, because there's oftentimes some pretty efficient items out there. So great comments. I appreciate that.
No, thank you.
Don, what about you? What did you think about week 4?
It was good. It was really good. Listening to everyone's comments, there's so much to key in on. There's so much success there. Chef Matthew, your comment in reference to changing your mind, I'm happy to change your mind to make it see something different. But you were spot on for a lot of it. Franklin, in reference to Duck Duck Goose, I totally agree with you. But when you're looking at cultural diversity, I didn't know what country I was in looking at this menu. I could have been in China or Japan, actually, and I got 2 types of duck, 2 different costs. And, yen to dollar, I'm doing great. But here it's seasonal. And so I wanted Duck Duck Goose like Franklin, I really did, but I went for the pork on the bone because when you buy that big piece, like Chef Matthew mentioned, how much waste do they have? They have to French cut that and clean that. There's so much involved in there. I think the biggest problem I had, everything was fine. Everything was great across the board. Thank you, Chef Matthew. I appreciate everything you've done so far. I would say on the menu, there were numbers on the right-hand side, and on that pork bone, it said 32. If that was 32 ounces, you're paying some money. So I tried to ignore that, and it was so hard to just not annotate anything in reference to it. So I think it was trying to steer me towards, I think this was a trick question you gave us to do this because of the numbers and no prices. So all in all, it was really good. It was good to understand it, look at it differently. Being in so many different countries, I had so many different prices and so many, like, it was crazy, but it was still fun. I really enjoyed it.
Cool, great comments. Yeah, they put this course together for us a couple of weeks ago, and so this is the first time we're running through this course with this information. So all of these comments that you're making is as far as your subjective criticism and things that you think we could have done better. We really seriously take that. We're gonna be applying that to the next go around with this class. So definitely keep those comments coming in. We really appreciate that information. It's very valuable to us. And,
Right.
You know, this whole program has grown from day one based on feedback. So
I already have 10 burgers set up, but I don't know which ones to use because there's so many. Every country has something special to offer in just naturalized food in that culture, and people just get away from culture here in the States. I mean, I shouldn't say people in general. It's just a lot of places just get away from it.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and it's unfortunate.
I mean, I'm jealous of Franklin's truck guy. I mean, come on, that burger sounds awesome.
Oh, I'm going to Franklin's place after I get off.
Right.
I'm going to take the camera outside because I have the truck parked in my driveway so you guys can take a look and see.
Right. Can you freeze dry that and put that in an MRE and we can reheat it?
Ooh.
I'm pretty sure we can work something out. Yeah, we can do something like that.
You do. I hope you do something with Grubhub. I mean, that would make me happy.
Yeah, it's better than Uber Eats. Uber Eats is too expensive. DoorDash, Grubhub, they're good.
Yeah, my neighbor runs the website for Grubhub, and that's a fascinating organization, and the way they work. Franklin, what about you? You're up there all quiet, man. What do you think about week 4?
One thing, it's just like the more I get into it, is just the more I realize I don't know. And
great comment, man. Great comment.
And it's just, and especially like trying to calculate up like the whole total food cost, and I'm still working on that portion of it though. But I'm just, because I'm thinking, okay, so if I buy salt and add a pinch of salt, I mean, how much you charge for a pinch of salt? Know, and it's just, and so a lot of it, like the big stuff, like your meat and stuff, I can get.
But you know what the problem? You know what the problem is people when they're doing recipes, and you'll take like Franklin's food truck, right? And he puts a piece of cabbage, or he puts shredded cabbage or whatever on top of his burger, and he thinks, that's not. It doesn't cost too much, right? It costs what, 10 cents for shredded cabbage on a burger. You're thinking, I don't have to build that into my cost. But then you have to stop and think, well, if I sell 5,000 hamburgers a month at 10 cents a pop, that number really accumulates rapidly. That pinch of salt may only cost you half a cent, right? But if you're doing 10,000 pinches of salt a month, right, that adds up quickly. Yeah. So that's a valuable statement you made.
Okay, but so, all right, so say, well, at least for now while I'm in class, I always go to Dollar Tree, kind of get my stuff. So, but I kind of went away from the regular iodized salt, so I just kind of go with the kosher salt now.
Good.
So if I end up, so I'm like, okay, so if I add a pinch, and if it's $1, it's like, what do you put on your, on your breakdown sheet?
Yeah. Well, what we do is we accumulate one estimated figure for our seasonings and our condiments, and so we'll take the average cost and figure out what the average person puts onto their burger, for example, right? So we know that the average person does 0.5 ounces of ketchup, 0.25 ounces of mustard. We average, 1 pinch of salt, 1 pinch of pepper. We accumulate a cost for that. And it may come up to like 50 cents or whatever the case is. That 50 cents goes into every single recipe that we cost.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense? So
that makes sense.
What we'll do is we'll basket all of those nominal costs, which we call, together. But you have to realize in this industry, it's a business of volume, and volume is where we lose money.
Yeah. Okay.
It's our repetitive cost. I thought for the first couple of years that I was in this business, I ran some very high volume establishments. In my ignorance, I thought, oh, you know what? Every time I run the dish machine, it's just a little bit of soap. I mean, who cares? And it's a cumulative cost that really takes down. That guy's only staying an extra 15 minutes. It doesn't matter, right? Well, it accumulates, and that's where it all catches up to you. So, and I like the statement that you made. The more you get into this, the more you realize you don't know. Everybody out there needs to really take that home. When I graduated, I knew everything, right? I was God. I've spent the last years of my career realizing I don't know anything. And I didn't start to grow until I came to that realization that I needed to have that attitude. And that's when I began to really move forward. So it's just words of advice from a chef. Chef Matthew, live from the frozen tundra.
Snow all day long today.
Cool.
We had snow. Yeah. It was pretty cold.
Don't complain. We got down to 73 in Tucson today. So.
Oh man, that's rough.
Yeah.
I'll mail you a pair of socks.
No. My flip flops are fine.
No, I got to talk a little bit about the week 4 assignment, and I really appreciate the feedback you guys are giving, because that helps me see that I'm steering in the right direction, and I want to give you guys the best information I can. And I know that was a tricky assignment, but also pretty deep and in a lot of good ways. So thanks for that feedback. And I think we're going to have a similar experience with the week 5 assignment. So it's deep again, and you got to think it through. And just be sure and look at that rubric. And I won't steal your thunder, Chef. I know we're going to get to that here in a little bit, but I'll talk about price and cost when we get there.
Please do. Yeah, please do. And there's before we move on to some other information, there's something I want to share with all of you. And I know Chef Matthew is going to be all over this one, but there are a lot of things that you learn here at Escoffier. There's a lot of little things that I say along the way. These are not things to listen to understand, and then move on. These are things that you must continue to practice throughout the remainder of your career. Do not think, hey, I learned about the little condiment thing at 50 cents. That's great. That's a smart idea. And then move on to industry. These are things that you must implement and practice on a religious basis. Yeah. It goes back to your knife cuts. You learned your knife cuts just because you did a brunoise doesn't mean you're proficient with a knife. Chef Matthew, at our level, we still continue to practice on a daily basis. This is stuff that you have to do repetitively to become proficient at it over time. So remember that as you move forward, and as we come to the end of this course, certainly take advantage of that, practice what we've told you, continue to think about these things, don't drift from it, and you'll become more and more efficient. If anyone out there is concerned about your grade at this point, which we don't have too many people in this class because this class has done really well, but if you do have concerns about your grade, certainly reach out to myself, and let's see what we can work out to help you out. It's our goal as chefs to see you guys do real well in this class and move on to the next. So we're going to do anything we can to help you out. So certainly feel free to reach out. Week 6 is upon us. We're at the dawn. We're knocking on the door, people. And it's you need to realize next week's assignment will be due no later than Sunday, December the 16th at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. You cannot turn in your assignment the following Tuesday. Does everybody understand that? Any questions? And that is because we go into our winter solace that following week, and I don't think Chef Matthew will come out until January sometime. In other words, we won't be available. So make sure you get your assignment next week turned in Sunday, December the 16th, no later than, so we can get that information to you. Let's move forward, everybody. Week 5. Here we are. Let's take a look at our class page so we can make sure that we are all on the same page. Hopefully everybody saw our little intro video this week, custom produced in downtown Tucson, Arizona.
That's impressive.
Yes, they don't make a lot of videos down here, you know that, right? So, I mean, you guys are spoiled, right? It's probably the only video that's been made here. But moving on, make sure that you get a good grip on your lesson on the research materials this week. The menu and production is especially helpful. And I know that we are in culinary school, but service and the menu is extremely critical. And tonight we're going to get into some service-related issues. As a chef, it is dangerous when you're running a restaurant as an executive chef and you have no idea what the waiter is doing. It can oftentimes lead to embarrassment. You need to take responsibility for that as well. Thank you very much for attending our live session this evening. And if you're not here, make sure that you watch the live session archive, but you wouldn't know that because you are here. And then our discussion board this week is a little bit different than you have had in other weeks. You need to know the last digit of your CView number, right? Of your student ID, CView student ID. So if you're the last digit in your phone number or in your CView student ID ends with 0, you're going to be working with French fries this week. And then if it's 1, you'll be working with ranch dressing, etc., all the way down through the bottom. Does everybody understand that? Is that pretty cut and dry? And we're going to talk about this here in just a few moments about the discussion forum, so everybody has a good grip on it. And our assignments are down here. There are 2 templates listed on the weekly assignment. You are responsible for both templates, not one or the other. It is both templates this week. So, did I make myself clear about the CView student ID number? Everybody understand that? So, if it ends with 6, we'll work with that particular product.
To grip.
Right. Extremely important. Let's move on to that subject quickly. Yes, Shannon.
Ah, shit. Hey, where do I find that? Sorry. Where do I find that ID number?
That you should, you can go to your student profile in the class page, and you should be able to see your CView student ID number there.
Okay. Yeah, that's the first time I ever heard that, so okay. That works.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Let's see. We got Frank. Frank, what's your question, buddy?
Okay, now mine was already pre-chosen for me.
Yeah,
you told me what is that normal? Is that okay?
If one popped up for you already, then this system might be automatically assigning the different items.
Okay, because they gave me like mayonnaise.
Ugh. Yeah, that's a good thing though. That's not bad.
Make it homemade.
You know what? You're going to like it because what we're going to talk about in a minute is going to make it a little bit more efficient for you. So it worked out well. Don, what's up?
Yes, sir. Same thing with for Frank and myself. We got the same thing. I already answered because it came up. I already submitted it just based off of what it says. So it automatically is picking those. So is there something else we have to do in reference to?
No.
Okay.
All right. Set. So they might have adjusted our system to automatically assign it this time. Has anybody else been automatically assigned? Yeah, Mary Lou? Melanie's not sure. Yeah?
It's all mayonnaise.
It's all mayonnaise. That's all right. Stick with mayonnaise because what we're about to talk about is going to make your life a little bit easier. We're going to jump into that subject right off the bat. There are certain things in the restaurant industry that we will either buy or we will prepare ourselves, right? And a lot of times it has to do with the cost of your menu items, and it also depends on your volume. And you have to remember that if you purchase a prepared product, it's obviously going to come in my opinion, at a little bit of a lower quality and at a higher price. Does that make sense? Lower quality, higher price than what you can prepare yourself. But in a reverse perspective, you would have to pay a lot of labor and you have to deal with a lot of inconsistencies when you are preparing it yourself. You have to remember, if you have 5 or 6 cooks, and a lot of times those are entry-level positions and people that don't know what they're doing and they're trying to prepare your recipes, they're going to make mistakes every now and then, and hopefully it doesn't end up your customer, but it could be quite damaging to your reputation if it does. French fries are a prime example. I love making homemade French fries, right? I've worked at a couple of places where we have one guy that all he does is cut a couple of cases of Kennebuck potato every day into shoestring fries. He blanches them, and then when we get an order, we cook them. We finish cooking them all the way. But it's expensive because we have to pay that guy to stand there to do it. So it would be less expensive to purchase the fries, and it would be much more consistent, in my opinion. However, the customers go crazy over the French fries. So that's a debate that you need to have within this discussion forum to understand. Mayonnaise is a prime example. I believe that homemade mayonnaise has a much better flavor. It's much healthier for you. It's much more versatile, and it also costs a lot less to make. But can you make it yourself every single time and maintain your volume? That's the question you have to answer, right? So, I mean, if you're in a facility, or if you feel confident that you are able to produce it on a regular basis, yeah, go for it, man. Absolutely. If you're in a finer dining restaurant, yeah, you're spending more money on labor. You have a higher quality of labor in your restaurant, in your kitchen, then you probably could get away with making it. But if you're at a, you know, I would imagine Franklin, for example, you probably buy your mayonnaise, don't you? Right?
Yeah, I actually do. I go to Restaurant Depot, but I'm gonna be honest with you. After making mayonnaise in my last class, Jesus, I don't, in my house I don't
Isn't
make
it?
myself. But I go through so much mayonnaise. I use the big jug from Restaurant Depot, and I do maybe 3 of them in about a week's time, and that's a lot of mayonnaise to make.
Yeah.
You know what? If I can make it, I will. Just because so much things that you can add, and a chipotle mayonnaise and this and that. Like, in my house, I make it. I learned how to make it in school here, and never again will I use Hellmann's for a burger or anything on my house.
So that's a real dilemma that you need to talk about and think about. You know, based on your volume and based on the fact that you're at a food truck, I would imagine the production would be a little bit limited and kind of difficult. And producing that much, I mean, that's a lot of egg yolks you'd have to crack every week to keep up, to make 3 gallons of mayonnaise. And so those are the types of things that we're looking for in the discussion forum this week. Does anybody have any questions about the discussion forum?
No, but I got burgers, so that's awesome. I got burgers for my assignment, so that's good.
No, that's pretty appropriate, I would imagine, for you.
Yeah.
You got to figure that out. We've always
a burger would be a great stocking stuffer for me. So.
Oh yeah. Burgers, we've always that's always been a huge discrepancy. I don't like pre-made hamburgers because I think when they press them, a lot of times they'll press too hard, and that forces those burgers to curl up. I don't know if you've ever seen a burger that becomes kind of like a dome shape when you cook it. That's because the press is they press the meat too hard. When you make your own burgers, you're able to control the level of fat. You're also able to control the compression rate. And what we do in the industry is we buy chubs, about 10-pound chubs, and they're long tubes. And then we have a pre-designated width that we cut each one into. And that becomes our burgers. They're very loose. They fall when the customer bites into it. They're very tender. And it's a lot less expensive to do that than buying the pre-made burgers. So it's just food for thought. Franklin's all over that one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I bought a meat grinder, and I used to buy the whole big slab of meat and do it myself. But to get that consistency of fat to meat ratio, it's very hard, you know, and not hard, it's time consuming. Because if you put the burger, you see, I cook it on the flat iron. So you put it there, then it starts sticking because it doesn't have enough fat context and whatnot.
Inconsistent.
So what I do is I just buy the 80-20, and then I make it myself, you know, with all the ingredients and everything, and then I let it sit for a couple of hours in a refrigerator before I put it on the flat iron.
I like it. I like it. That's a smart move.
Yeah, so when I spent $400 on this machine that I used it maybe 5 times, and I said, you know what, the hell with the consistency, because I can't add fat, take away fat. You put too much, you don't put. Then how do you get 80-20? How do you be like, okay, this is 80 and this is 20, and it's just too much time consuming.
Well, that's exactly what we're looking for in the discussion forum this week, because you're going to run across a tremendous amount of products. Salad dressings are prime examples in the restaurant industry. Rarely do you go into a restaurant any longer and find that somebody actually made the salad dressing there. There's been a real movement in the past. Look at Shannon. He's like, yep. You got to, in the past couple of years, there's been a real movement in the restaurant industry to begin preparing things yourself. I see no point other than the fact that they're going to do the dishes to go out to a restaurant where they've purchased everything and put it on your plate, right? So why not stay home? Anybody can go to King Soopers and buy whatever they need and replicate the same meal. So I prefer homemade products, but that's all up to your concept and whether you can get it or not. Any other questions about the discussion forum? Let's rock on to your menus. We're going to blow through some information. If you have any questions, make sure that you ask, because we're going to go pretty fast here for the next few minutes. We're going to talk about balancing your menu. Menu balancing is extremely critical. You'll find that a lot of restaurants, when they write menus, they can be very heavy on sauté, very heavy on broil, very heavy on their pantry stations. And that creates a disaster with the flow of your work in your kitchen. You cannot do that. So for example, if you have a sauté station and a grill and everything else in your kitchen, and you write a very heavy sauté menu, you've got chicken piccata, veal marsala, you've got all these sauté items on there, 90% of your orders that come into the kitchen are on that station. You can only have one guy that works that station, right? And then you also have to pay a guy to work on your broiler. Then you have a guy working in your pantry. You have to write your menu so it balances out across all of your stations. It's extremely critical for operational proficiency. And it can be very costly in the long run if you don't do that. The way that we do that is we will accumulate our sales by percentages over a month or a quarterly period, right? So we've established in a 90-day period that we sell 85 pan-seared New York strip steaks, and we only sold 2 hamburgers. So that tells me, hey, maybe I should move the strip steak to the grill station and grill it instead of sauteing it, balance it out, increases my operational efficiency, and I can make a little bit more money. So it's something that you need to really focus on when you're writing your menu. So when it comes to a bakery or restaurant, will divide its menu up based on stations, right? Some of the common stations that we have in the kitchen, like I just mentioned, we have the expo, we have the sauté, we have the broiler, we have the garde-manger. We'll divide our menu amongst those stations. Bakeries work a little bit differently. They will divide their labor by task, right? So if they have to use their lamination machine, they know they can only produce so much on that machine on a regular basis. So they're going to spread their menu items out. Maybe they won't do so many laminated items like puff pastry, but they'll focus more on pies like pâte brûlée and everything else to evenly spread their labor out and their workspace. So be conscientious of your workspace and the amount of area that you have to work in and the labor that you have to put those items together. It's very, very important. This week, they talk a little bit about prepared food. Pre-prepared food, I should say, which is very, very important. And we use a lot of it in the restaurant industry. A lot of people are under the assumption that every time you walk into a restaurant and you order confit de canard or duck confit, that they make it there for you. It's not the case. We prepare a lot of items in advance, which cuts back on our cooking time. And the reason we do that, one of the reasons we do that, is to spread out the operational efficiency. So I know that if I have braised short ribs on my menu, I can put a little bit of work on the day crew. They can prep it out, get it ready. Then I can put a little bit of work on my saute cook at nighttime to have them heat that up and serve it to you, versus putting all the work onto one guy. So it's spreading the work out across. Does that make sense, Chef Matthew?
Yeah, that's really important. And just like you mentioned with the menu, I mean, this is something when you open, hopefully you've got that pretty well figured out, because you could be running straight into a nightmare if you don't have that balance. There's only so much you can do on a line at when you get orders in. There's only so long people are going to wait for food, and 10 minutes in the kitchen seems like 20 minutes sitting in the dining room. So that there's kitchen time and then there's real time. So you really have to be careful with that and have that efficiency nailed down. You also don't want somebody ordering an item that takes 2 minutes to cook and someone ordering the same on the same table ordering an item that takes 25 minutes to cook. And then you got to train people to time that, which does happen with enough time. With experience, you learn how to time things pretty well, but you don't want that complication. So there's a lot to that.
There's something really important. That's a great comment you just made, Chef Matthew. There's something really important that everyone out there needs to learn. When you walk into work as a chef and you walk out of work as a chef 12 hours later, that's like a 5-minute time span in your head. I mean, it goes fast, right? But when you're sitting in a dining room and you're hungry, right, and you're waiting for your food, it can be an eternity. So what we're talking about, especially Chef Matthew brought up, when you write your menus, it's really, really important that all of your times are relatively close, right? So like Chef Matthew was saying, that if somebody orders a quick fire item, something that's only going to take a minute or two to prepare, and somebody else on the table orders a well-done tomahawk steak that takes 25 minutes to cook, right? You have to figure out that balance. What are you going to do with the guy that's starving that just ordered that 2-minute item with the other person that ordered the well-done tomahawk steak? So if you can avoid a lot of that by writing out your menus efficiently. In industry, we like to average between 10 and 15 minutes from the time that the person placed their order till they get the food in front of them, okay? 10 to 15 minutes, so that's a pretty quick time. We have a couple of different systems in the restaurants. A lot of places will work with what's called an order fire system, and meaning that the ticket comes in, the expediter says, ordering 2 New York strip steaks, 4 pan-seared salmon, everybody cooks it, puts it in the window, and it's gone. Finer dining restaurants use a completely different system, which is also called order and then fire. So for example, that same ticket will come in. As an expediter, I will say, give me 4 New York strip steaks, medium, medium rare, well done, and medium. Give me 4 salmons. So me as the cook, I will then prepare those dishes halfway and put them up under the window. Meanwhile, those people are being served their appetizers or their soups or their salads. The waiter will keep an eye on that table. And when they're about 4 to 5 minutes away from finishing their salads, the waiter is going to come back and say, fire table 32. I'm going to take those 4 New York strip steaks and that salmon. I'm going to finish them off real quick, get them on the plate, put them in the window in 4 minutes. So that's another system that's very commonly used. It allows us to really make that food nice and fresh for you, and it gets the food out in a very timed fashion. You'll notice appetizers in restaurants, right? They're all quick fire items, aren't they?
Yeah.
You never go into a restaurant and see a 20-minute appetizer, right? Because we want to get something to you quickly, fast. Did I get that right, Chef Matthew?
Yeah, you nailed it, and you brought something to my mind that I don't want to go too deep into, but I want to mention it. And Shannon, Franklin, you guys are going to know. Anybody in restaurants is going to know. There's a language that you use. There's a lingo that is common nationwide, and I've tested it. I've proven it. You can look online and find restaurant lingo lists that will crack you up. They're so true. That people that are inside the industry know it. People that are outside don't know what you're talking about. So, and I know we were just talking about timing earlier. You said when you walk in for your 12-hour shift and when you walk out, it's 5 minutes. Well, when you're driving to work and you have to use the restroom, and then you leave and go, oh, I never used the restroom. Yeah, it's called restaurant bladder, and it's a real thing. It's a real thing.
Yeah. And for example, if I was to look over at Chef Matthew and I told him, hey, 86, and I'm in the weeds, you need to get over here and bail me out.
Yeah.
So, okay. You know, but you say that to the average person and they're like, huh? What's he talking about? You know, hey, fire 36. What? You know? Yeah, so there's a lot of words that we use in the restaurant industry that are very unusual and don't make sense. And we speak a very different language, and a lot of that lingo is picked up as you work. So and continue. So that's kind of the little point. The point of the little talk that we're having right now is about menu timing. It's something you really need to think through. I know that Don has talked about that German concept before. And, you know, there's some braised dishes that are very common in that cuisine. And there's also a lot of quick fire items like schnitzel, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Don? Yeah.
It is. In fact, we actually have a mom and pop that work out of their house, and they turn their garage into a restaurant. And now these people are in their 70s. You call for a reservation and say, no room. Don't come by tomorrow. Or you get there, you get it when you get it. And I mean, they've been in the business for so long, they're that rude, but it's just who they are. So
that's the way it rolls. Yeah.
This is the only extreme. She'll tell you, no, you can't order that, only this. And you're like, okay, so.
I love that mentality.
Only works for them.
When I opened up my second restaurant, when we initially opened, it was a fine dining restaurant. We ended up doing very well, but when we initially opened, we weren't doing as much business as I wanted to, and we were a little bit on the slower side. We were still doing well, but still a little bit on the slower side. So when people would call up for reservations, I instructed the hostess staff to say, hey, we're booked tonight solid. Maybe you could check back in about a week for a reservation to see if you could get in. And you know what? It took off at that point because, you know, people thought, hey, this guy's jamming. And, you know, next thing you know, they started piling in like nothing. Oh, yeah, we could fit you in tonight. Yeah, we'll fit you in. You know, and so that mentality works. But going back to what we were talking about, you know, with your braised items with the German food, the stews, etc., and then like a quick fire item like a schnitzel, you've got to really balance that out on your menu, right? So, you know, that braised stew would be prepared in advance, kept in your steam table hot. So by the time you put it up, that schnitzel would be coming out of the pan, and you'd be serving that at the same time as well. So really think that operational aspect through. Bakeries are a big issue. And is anybody interested in bakery, cafe type thing? Bakeries, it's a good thing to learn because it can apply to the restaurant industry as well. And I've used a lot of these techniques in my kitchens. Bakeries work in what we call series. Okay, so for example, it would be impossible to have a baker come in and make a little bit of pot au choux, a little bit of pâté pressé, make a little bit of puff pastry every single day, right?
Right.
It just would not be feasible. So what they do is they create a series of days that they bake particular items. On Mondays, they only do muffins and muffin batter. On Tuesdays, they only do puff pastry. On Wednesdays, they only do pot au choux. On Thursdays, they only do pâte pressé, right? It's a great way to organize your labor and make it much more efficient. I ran one restaurant. We baked every single piece of bread ourselves. We only did hamburger buns on Wednesdays. That's it, man. We only did pizza doughs on Thursdays and Mondays. That was it. And if you can address that mentality in your restaurant to say, hey, you know, Franklin, I only do my special sauce. I only prepare that on Tuesdays. You save yourself so much time and effort, you know, because you know that, hey, on Tuesday, I got to make time to make it. And then you don't worry about it for the rest of the week. So those are some of the tricks that we use to organize ourselves.
When you think about it too, if you're making dressing, for example, making 10 gallons of dressing, if you have the vessel to mix it in, really doesn't take that much more time than making 5. So you might as well make 10 and cover yourself for a whole week. So a lot of batch sizes like that can make it really simple. So
yeah. All right, guys. Ladies and gents, front of the house. We're going to switch gears real quick, and we're going to move into the front of the house. It is a critical element of a restaurant. Each and every single one of you really need to learn how important it is. As a chef, you need to stay focused on the big picture, right? You cannot just stay focused on your immediate environment. You cannot just worry about the kitchen. You have to worry about the entire restaurant in order to have a successful facility. You have to instill that in all of your staff. What that means in a nutshell, that is, if the front of the house ever goes down and they get in the weeds and they need to be bailed out, you can send your staff out to the front, and they know how to bust tables, they know how to set tables, they know how to take care of customers, right? My last position, I was director of food and beverage. I shouldn't tell the story, but I will. I was director of food and beverage at this at a very fine dining, fine hotel, and I walked down to one of the dining rooms one day, and the staff, somebody had called in sick and they were really busy in the dining room. They needed help. So I jumped in and I picked up tables. And, fortunately I had learned how to behave in that fashion and wait on tables. But then it turned out I was waiting on the Doobie Brothers, which was one of the coolest experiences of my life. So that's kind of like a little side thing, but I don't know what that has to do with this class, but I thought I'd just share it. But, types of service are very, very important. And as you are working with your menu and your concept design, there are several different types of services to consider. American service is traditionally referred to as, putting a bowl down on the table, letting everybody serve themselves, right? That's what we like to refer to as American service. French service is something that we prepare tableside. I don't know if anybody's ever been to a restaurant where they make Caesar salad tableside, or they bone the fish tableside, and then you get into a little bit more of a formal style of service, which is Russian service, where they actually prepare meats tableside and do a little bit of cooking tableside, such as cherries Jubilee, bananas Foster, that type of thing. And then obviously you get into the counter service, which is basically for your casual concepts and et cetera, et cetera. Let's take a quick look at some of the different positions that are in the front of the house that are very interesting to learn. Everybody in fine dining restaurants, if you ever have the chance to work with a sommelier, it's a wonderful experience. That's the guy that walks around the dining room and sells wines to customers. Sommeliers are very high payroll, very expensive people to have in your restaurant, but they also generate a tremendous amount of revenue. So basically what they are is a very high paid salesman walking around the dining room selling bottles of wine. Dining room manager, which is also called the maitre d' de hotel, that is somebody that works at the hostess stand. The hostess stand is control central for a restaurant. They control the flow of people coming in. If a hostess is not doing his or her job and they seat 30 people at once, then your kitchen is going to get 30 tickets at once. So it's a very critical, you want to create a flow of people coming in. 5 here, 4 there, 2 there, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have captain, which is a little bit more of a formal style of service. The captain will lead a back waiter and a busser. And then place settings, we'll talk about this just briefly. I don't know how to explain this, how to get into this topic too well. Place settings are really critical in restaurants because we use a tremendous amount of smallware to work with this stuff, and it's very expensive. A lot of it gets lost. It ends up in your garbage can. I think Shannon was singing the blues about that a week or two ago, about the amount of stuff that was going into the garbage can. So this is something that we really focus on, our inventory levels. But traditionally, when you sit down to dine, you'll see several sets of forks, spoons, and knives and everything else. The way it works is you work from the outside to the inside, because everybody always looks at you and they say, what fork do I start with? Right? So you always start with the fork on the outside, and then you work your way to the inside as each course is being served. This informal table setting that is up here on the screen right now is a fairly classic traditional setting. And the salad fork is also referred to as the appetizer fork. And then the dinner fork, obviously, is what we would use for our entree. That's a larger fork with prongs on it. And then our fork, it comes down to detail when it comes to working in the front of the house. It's really, really interesting. We actually take pictures of our place settings, so to train our staffs to replicate it each and every time. If you put the fork backwards on the table, pointing the opposite way out, that is a horrible mistake. And it shows a true sense of ignorance when setting a dining room. So these are a lot of the little details that we look for. The blade always has to be pointed into the plate, right? You always start with a large spoon on the outside to serve your soup, and then you switch to a smaller spoon on the inside. If you're serving dessert, you'll take your silverware. The dessert silverware goes on top of the plate. And think we've always seen a lot of silverware that goes on top of the plate, and that's traditionally served with dessert or a third or fourth course. We're not going to get too much into this. This setting right here is something that we would use more for a banquet style setting. When we're expecting a large group of people, you want to have as much smallware on the table, which eliminates you having to run back and forth to your service stations to get all of your product. And I'll be glad to discuss this with any of you that want to get a little bit more into the front of the house. I'll be glad to have a Zoom session with you and talk a little bit more with you one-on-one, because I know we're going a little bit fast. But if you take a look at how many pieces of smallware are on this standard setting here for a formal place setting, it's a lot of silverware if you have 500 people, isn't it? Think about it. And it's a lot of glassware. And if you're serving a 3-course meal to 500 people, guess how many plates that is, right? That's 1,500 plates that you're going to have to pay somebody to wash. So there's a lot of associated cost. Once you get into the ultra formal dining room realm, you get into quite a bit more of your glassware and tableware, which I'll be glad to discuss with any of you on the side if you care to do so. Let's move on. Do we have any questions at this point? Anybody want to know? Anybody have any particular curiosity about the front? Don, what's up, man?
Yeah, nothing too much on the front, other than when you were talking about your wine guru there, who does the wine. It's very polite. I used to do a lot of wine, selling wine here from Italy, imported from a family business here. So bringing that bottle of wine when you're able to bring in wine to some restaurants, and letting them try that wine too, because they may end up putting that on their menu.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a very polite thing to give them a glass and let them try that. So it's just a little something to, it breaks the ice, so to speak, within the atmosphere. And you get better service actually too. So
I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a lot of front of the houses. There's a lot of restaurants that do allow BYOB. Arizona is pretty heavily regulated. If you were to bring your own bottle of wine in and you were to give somebody a sip of it in the restaurant, that would be a lot of liability on the restaurant owner. So for us here in Arizona, it's kind of a no-no, but other areas it's certainly welcome.
No, but you have the open gun law, so
yeah. So yeah, it all depends on which part of the country you're in. But make sure that in your restaurants, if any of you ever decide that you want to allow somebody to bring a cake in, if you ever want to allow somebody to bring in a bottle of wine, there are costs that are directly related to you, right? We call those cake cutting fees, or we call them corkage fees.
Yeah, corkage.
Yeah. So for example, if somebody brings in a bottle of wine to my restaurant, I have to charge them. And the reason I charge them is I have to pay somebody to open the bottle of wine. I have to pay somebody to wash the wine glasses. I have to pay somebody to stock the wine glasses. And the same thing goes with the cake. So, you know, don't let those little costs slip away from you because they get expensive after a while. So it's very, very important.
You also assume liability. So if they bring in 2 bottles and one person guzzles both of them and gets hammered, then you assume liability because you pulled the corks. So it's nuts.
Dram shop laws are a tremendous amount of liability. I want to jump ahead. I know we went through the front of the house really quick. Like I mentioned, if anybody ever wants to learn about the front of the house, a little bit more about it, I'd be really happy to talk to you about it and make time for you. So certainly send me a message and I'll be glad to work with you on that. This week's assignment is right over here. Let's take a look at it. Down over in here, you will notice your weekly assignment. These restaurants have decided to add a burger to the menu. This is one of 2 templates that you are required to use. One is a burger, the other one is a tartlet. Both of these restaurants, Cafe Luke and La Cochon, are both adding these items to their menu. They are different concepts that you guys have read and seen from your menus so far. So you're going to fill these templates out according to the style of each concept. For each of the 2 restaurants, come up with a burger for that restaurant. Describe the ingredient it would use and how it would be plated, presented. Give it a price and explain why you chose that price. You want that price to be in the nature of the other pricing on the menu. Does that make sense? So if you look at the Cafe Luke menu and you come to the realization the average menu price is $15, do not put the burger on there at $6, right? You want to put it right about in that area, okay? And then, you know, what ingredients would this restaurant have? If it's an upscale restaurant, I would almost use Franklin's Burger. I mean, that sounded pretty killer. But you can have a lot of fun with this exercise because it does involve a fair amount of creativity to answer this. And then here's the actual assignment itself. So you're just going to fill out those 2 templates and you're going to submit them to Chef Matthew. And you also make sure that you give a reasonable description of the ingredients that you're going to be using as well. And I did it. We're only 3 minutes over. Oh my God. That killed me. I think we should have a whole class on the front of the house because I think it's one of the most misunderstood things that chefs need to understand. Because as a chef, you're going to have a lot of very stressful nights. When the front of the house goes down and they begin to have struggles, when they've been oversat, right? And when the volume becomes too great to handle, which happens, right? Guess what flows downhill? I can't say it. Shannon said it earlier.
Snowballs.
Huh? Yes.
Snowballs.
Footballs. It starts with an S and it rolls downhill. And by the time it gets to the kitchen, it can be off. Yeah. So, you know, that's when there's a lot of challenges. Take this to the bank when I tell you this. There's a lot of challenges that occur between front of the house and back of the house. Servers and cooks are like cats and dogs, right? They will go at it on occasion. You, as a chef, need to have the knowledge and the ability to prevent that from happening. Because when a server rings in a table of 12 and has a tremendous amount of errors on the ticket, special modifications and everything else, your cooks are stressed out, they're tired, they begin going after the server, right? But if you understand the front of the house, you will have been able to prevent that from happening to the server in the first place. So, you know, be very conscientious of that. Are there any questions? Don, what's going on?
Yeah, you know, just to carry out what you were saying about the front of the house, that's why we have managers that run the front of the house. You have a bar manager, you have a kitchen manager, you have your chef. So there's, you have the street, you're talking strategic overview, which is perfect. And you're trying to get into that tactical limit in being a great operations officer and understanding that whole concept of it. And that's why we rely on those managers. So yes, strategically, I need to understand the entire concept of what goes in it, what comes out of it, all the mishaps and everything else, trial by error. But that's why we have those positions, like you were saying, having those managers in there. So having a class of just the front of the house is outstanding. And I think having one on your bar would be good too. And not only, it's not just the chef, but you also have your runners and someone who manages those tickets all the time too. They're two separate things, because you can't have your cook running your tickets and telling them and firing them, and it's just not going to work. You're gonna lose all your hair.
Yeah, traditionally we have an expo on one side, and then we'll have an expo on the other side as well.
Right, exactly. Yes.
Plating. And then there'll be another expo on the other side that coordinates the front of the house activity. Going back to the dining room managers, and I would never slam any of them, but you will realize that chefs have a tendency to be kind of dominate the environment. And, sometimes those dining room managers kind of fold under pressure, and, they theoretically get stuck at a table, so, have
you seen the movie The Chef?
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is his restaurant, but he wants to cook a certain way. That's a perfect example of an owner trying to dominate the kitchen, and then vice versa. But it's a good movie, so.
Yeah. It's Franklin, one of the emerging positions that we have in the restaurant industry is called Chef and B. And I took my first Chef and B position at a hotel back in 1998. And a Chef and B is not only in charge of the kitchen, but he's in charge of the entire food and beverage operation. And it's a very wise decision. It can be very burdensome to that individual, but we are technically the stronger, higher educated people in the restaurant industry. So we have a tendency to run the front of the house, and that's not across the board. There are a lot of very talented front of the house people out there. Don't take me wrong when I say this, but I'm talking about the majority of the time. So, Mary Lou, what's going on?
Yes, Chef, really quick on the discussion questions. We're just supposed to state on there, I want to make sure I understand it properly, whether we would have it made or pre-made, right? Purchased already.
And why?
Okay, alrighty.
Yeah. So, and we talked a lot about that at the beginning. The mayonnaise, Franklin was going off about how much better it tastes. Then we talked about the French fries and some of these other items. Ranch dressing is a huge one that we go through in the restaurant industry. A lot of people prefer to buy it, and there's a bunch of reasons. So,
y'all got cool ones.
What's that?
Everybody got cool ones. I got dill pickles.
You got ripped off.
Yes, I did.
Actually, that's a pretty cool one to get, because homemade dill pickles, in my opinion, can't be beat. But they are time consuming, and they do take some skill and ability to make. So you really need to really think that through. A dill pickle can't be made in 15 minutes. It takes time. And so you really have to stay ahead of your production. We used to make them in a place I worked at, so they could be cool.
I make pickles all the time. I've got about 5 friends that keep giving me the jar back, and I keep refilling it. And man, if I was selling them, I'm not kidding you, I'd be making good money.
Okay, so I got to finish before we end class. I got to finish my Doobie Brothers story, right? So I get to I wait on the Doobie Brothers, and it's like, wow, this is so cool, man, because this band I have a lot of respect for. Then I run into our coffee service area where the guests come down and they get complimentary coffee, and I'm standing there cleaning it up, and I turn around and Kevin Costner is standing next to me. And it's like, oh my God, I'm surrounded by all these people and I'm nobody. Yeah. So it was kind of, I mean, you get to run into a lot of people like that in the industry, and it's kind of one of those real neat side things, that we get to experience. So I think we had a good class tonight. We covered a lot of information very quickly. Once again, if any of you want to get further into the front of the house, I'd love to talk to you. I'll sit down. We can have a one-on-one session. I certainly don't mind. Reach out. Don't forget, next week, your assignment is due Sunday, December the 16th. And I hope everybody has a fantastic week. Get a hold of me if you're concerned about your grade. If we don't hear from you, sayonara. Take care, everybody.